Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Bismillahi wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in wa ba'd. Allah in whose name we begin, the eternal with no beginning, everlasting with no ending. Peace and choicest salutations upon the cream of creation, Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wassalam. If you've just tuned in, this is Radio Al-Ansaar on 90.4 FM and 105.6 FM with me, your host, Shaykh Faheem of the Islamic Lifestyle Solutions, on the program The Wake Up Project and analysis of the signs of the end times. By the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we are here in this blessed month of Ramadan, in which we are discussing, as we have been for several years, the subject of Islamic eschatology, in which we analyze the signs of the end times as foretold by the Messenger sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. Now, our subject matter for today is the question, and those of you who have received the post, I think about an hour or so that we sent, is the Dajjal already born? We'll come to that shortly, as we normally do, just a few announcements before that. Firstly, those of you who are, whether you are in the area or not, it's still relevant, inshallah. Shortly after Eid al-Fitr, inshallah, I will be conducting a very, very important class that will be for a period of about 3 months, inshallah, meaning one lesson a week. We have either you come for a Monday, a Wednesday, or a Saturday class, inshallah, on the essentials of the deen. So the course is an Aqidah class, meaning on the creeds, the creed of the Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah, in which we will be going through the doctrine of the Ahlus Sunnah from the all-important and one of the most famous books by Imam An-Nasafi, that is throughout the world taught at the various institutions, commencing on the 19th of May 2021. So we have 2 classes, a Monday and a Wednesday class at the NMJ Islamic Center. Those are at 6 p.m. So you can choose between the two, which one suits you. And then for those who can't make it on weekdays, I also have a Saturday morning class. And we'll be going through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's attributes, cosmology, epistemology, meaning, how we arrive at knowledge, ontology, the all important questions on taqdeer. Very, very important subject matter. You have to know how to defend your aqidah from atheists, apologists, and those who want to propagate deviant kind of ideologies. So send an email to ils@hotmail.co.za, inshallah, and try and get a space. I think the Monday class is almost full, but the option for the Wednesday and Saturday is still probably there. Those of you who are watching online on Facebook and YouTube, please do like and share the links. That will be highly appreciated, and it will allow others as well to join into the program. Those of you on Radio Al-Ansar, if you would like to share in the discussion on is the Dajjal already born, and we'll explain why we are discussing this particular subject today, you can send your questions through onto the WhatsApp studio line, and hopefully you can also be part of the discussion today, and you can send your queries through related to the subject of Al-Masih al-Dajjal and other related queries on the subject as well. Very, very important subject. And I had, again, once we sent the link out, there has been a lot of people who have been asking, and we'll try to get through to those things, but send relevant questions, please. We can't be discussing, example, the subject of, the smoke in the end times or the malhama, although it is to a certain degree related, but we want to stick to the actual subject matter of discussion for today, which is the Dajjal already born? Right? And I do know that some of you were worried and sending messages of Ya Allah, Ya Salam, Allah Ta'ala save us, and that's very, very important. It's a very, very important reaction, but we need to know what is the bigger picture. And on that note as well, There is a particular program, the Big Picture, that deals with a lot of these matters, but in a very, very different light. On the Saturday, by Brother A.B. Dawji, who tackles very, very related matters to the subject of eschatology, but from a political angle, a lot of the corruption in the world as well. So let's get straight into it, right? There was a picture that I sent out of a little child with an eye on the forehead. And of course, many people looked at this, and some people even sent back reading their kalima, right? Um, and that's an amazing reaction, because firstly, it means that you primarily fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You believe in those prophecies as foretold by the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that's really important. But here's the thing. Now, I want you to listen very, very carefully to what I tell you. When I was about 14 or 15 years old, coming from that time, I was in Orient Islamic School, and we used to go to madrasa. So if you received that particular picture that I sent to you today, and I did send it on social media, that exact picture, when I entered madrasa, there was a picture on the wall which said, Dajjal is born, and he had a picture of a child with a one eye. And I just froze. That exact picture, or almost its like, is what I posted on social media. Why did I do that? Because I received it with the same, well, not the same question, saying, today that Dajjal is born, and the picture was sent. And I said, no, I am not going to allow these kind of things. Every now and then it pops up and it creates havoc. I do acknowledge the question by our young Maulana Sahil Ali. Sheikh, could you inform us today, where is Dajjal right now? And is he at one place, or is he moves as he wants? Not like I have direct contact with him. Yes, but inshallah we'll deal with it, right? Okay, so first and foremostly, my respected viewers as well as listeners, when you see or hear anyone who speaks about a child that is born, so there's two things. One is the birth of Dajjal, and the other is the child with the one eye. We'll come to that part second. Let's go to the first part. The question is the Dajjal already born? Let's focus on the birth part. I have not come across a single narration that deals with the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam speaking about the birth of Dajjal. I haven't come across it. What I have come across is the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam alluding to and speaking about khurujud Dajjal, the emergence of Dajjal. Now, if we apply our God-given senses that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, the fact that the Quran was sent to implore the rational faculty, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ, we apply the same thing, of course, to the hadith literature. And we don't take things, of course, in isolation. We try to collate as much of the information together. The fact that the Prophet ﷺ didn't mention that the Dajjal will be born, but he will emerge. This tells us that we should abstain from passing along this kind of information that spreads fear about Dajjal born. Now remember, I didn't state that Dajjal is born. We asked a question and we said, tune in for the particular answer. There are people out there who receive a picture of a child born with one eye and they start telling, oh my gosh, Dajjal is born, read your kalima. Now, we understand that this may be a sincere effort to create awareness, but it creates unnecessary panic. And if we don't have the requisite Islamic knowledge, what does it do? This ignorance now begins to snowball, and it can create a misconception that the Prophet ﷺ has actually said this. So The Dajjal being born is not something that is located within our tradition. Now, if those who were tuned into last week's episode, we mentioned that some of the Orthodox Jews had announced their own Messiah. Okay. Now, whether or not he's the Dajjal, we discussed that subject. You can get the links either on YouTube or on my Facebook page from last week, or get from Radio Al-Ansar and go through that, because they announced their own Messiah. And what's the link between the Messiah of the Jews and how we deduce that the Dajjal will be a Jew? That's a separate subject, but it is definitely something we need to be aware of. Now, since we know Dajjal won't be born, then the next logical question will be, how will he emerge if we don't have any information about him being born? Now, this is a very important question, which we'll have to tackle last, because this is the one that's going to take the most amount of time. Before that, we have to tackle the secondary aspect pertaining to the image that comes to mind when we speak about Dajjal. In most of my classes and courses that we teach, and when we reach the eschatology side of it, and we tell the students, right, we're going to say a word, and what's the first thing that comes to mind? And we go through various words. So, for instance, we'll speak about a specific, so we'll say, example, Rabi' al-Awwal. What's the first thing that comes to mind? And people will say, the Prophet Muhammad, right? Because from the time you're little, you know that the Prophet Muhammad was born in the month of Rabi' al-Awwal. So that's the first thing that comes to mind. And then, you say, example, Ramadan, people will say fasting, or you say fasting, people will say Ramadan, or some people will say Quran, like that. Then when we say Dajjal, one of the first things that comes to mind in people's in the perception of people is a one eye. So this is why when you see a picture or you hear of a child born with one eye, people lose their minds and they start spreading this information. So how do we deal with it as Muslims? Remember, we have to spread awareness. We have to remove the misconceptions in society. And this is why in my book on Islamic eschatology, The Beginning of the End, one of the important things is I dealt with is Dajjal misconceptions. We called it monstrous misconceptions. Why? Because people assume Dajjal is this cyclops-like creature. No, a child born like that, it's a deformity. We can say it's a deformity. Why? Because there are no ahadith about Dajjal being born. So it has to be a deformity, and we understand it that way. Then we come to the other part. So where did this idea come from that Dajjal has one eye? It couldn't have come from nowhere. There has to be a reason. Now, aside from the fact that if you look at a $1 bill, you'll see the one eye on the pyramid. If you see all the one eye symbolism all over Hollywood, even now in Bollywood, all over the internet, there's one eye symbolism everywhere you look. People worshiping the Dajjal. There's tattoos on bodies of people. That's a separate thing. But for us as Muslims, where did we get this idea that Dajjal is one-eyed? I mean, we can understand the rest of the world, but what's our excuse? This is why the ulama say, stop the copy and paste habit. In certain instances, it may be beneficial, but in many cases, it can be detrimental. I will give you one such example. There is a hadith in Al-Bukhari, and the narrator is Sayyidina Abu Hurairah radiallahu an, and it states, عن أبي سلمة رضي الله عنه, who says, سمعت أبا هريرة, I heard Sayyidina Abu Hurairah رضي الله عنه say, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, that the Messenger صلى الله عليه وسلم said, ألا أحدثكم حديثا عن الدجال? Shall I not tell you about the Dajjal, a story, ما حدث به نبي قومه, that no prophet told his nation? Meaning there's something very unique that I, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is going to tell you about. إِنَّهُ أَعْوَرُ. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, he is one-eyed. So when you look at this hadith in Al-Bukhari, you'll see the translation says he is one-eyed. Okay? And then the Messenger ﷺ said other things about the narration, which I'm not going to get into now and get sidetracked. Okay? So this narration, which is correct, people took it, copied and pasted. Those who were lazy, didn't do their homework, started discussing it and said, look, according to the hadith, Dajjal is one-eyed. Those who are enemies of the hadith, they started criticizing it, because there are people today who follow the Quran only, they don't follow the hadith, right? And so they look for these kind of things so they can criticize. So as a result of that, this information started perpetuating amongst people until it became prevalent that Dajjal is one-eyed. However, those who have this, as I always call it, a one-eyed epistemology, meaning that you have a one-dimensional view of arriving at knowledge. You don't understand how we deduce things. And this is why in the new course that I will be teaching on creed, one of the fundamental things that we will be teaching is how you arrive at knowledge. There are people today that go to university, they've been taught their entire life, they've been given knowledge, but they don't know how we come to conclusions. And this is one of the things that our ulama centuries ago, they had delineated these important things. So I'll just explain this before we go for our first break, inshallah. In a hadith that explains the misconception is also located in Al-Bukhari, subhanallah, which means what? That we don't study a hadith in isolation. So this is the explanation. ذكر النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يوما, the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام mentioned one day بين ظهر الناس, right, in front of the people. What did he mention? المسيح الدجال. The Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام mentioned the false Messiah الدجال. فقال صلى الله عليه وسلم إن الله ليس بأعور. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not one-eyed. ألا إن المسيح الدجال أعور العين اليمنى. Listen very carefully. The Prophet ﷺ said, while Al-Masih al-Dajjal is blind in the right eye. Now look at the difference between the two. In the first narration, the Prophet ﷺ said he's one-eyed. Those people who took that narration in isolation and spread that across the world, this limited understanding, they told the people that the Dajjal is one-eyed. When you say that a person is one-eyed, then they started saying what? Okay, he has one eye. So from one-eyed, it became he has one eye. So when he has one eye, they painted this image in their mind that he's like a cyclops-like creature. But now the Prophet ﷺ is saying, no, Dajjal is one-eyed. How? He is blind in the right eye. If he's blind in the right eye, and for the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam to say he's blind in the right eye, it means he has a left eye. Because if he have a left eye, then why would the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam say that he's blind in the right eye? He would just say he's blind in the eye if he only had one. And you could only arrive at this conclusion when you collate the information together, when you don't study the hadith in isolation, which is one of the major problems that we have in society today. So is Dajjal one-eyed like a cyclops-like creature? No, he's not. He has two eyes and he's blind in the right eye. Now, what does that mean? What could imply? Inshallah, we'll get to there. And we'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll deal with the question that which come, Maulana, that could you inform us where is the Dajjal? Is he stationary in one place? Does he move? Because these are the implications of if he's not born, then where is he? How will he emerge? Inshallah, stay tuned. We'll come back shortly and continue with the discussion. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Welcome to Simple
Sharia-compliant Islamic banking, called Sirat, the path to success. For attractive return on your investments, financing for working capital, trade or property finance.
Ramadan reminder, day 9. To elevate your mood, stay longer in Sujood.
Any branch to inquire. T's and C's apply. Opportunity, extra, extra. You're all about it. Extra, extra. You're all about it.
Time for charity, time for love and unity. Ramadan reminder, day 9. To elevate your mood, stay longer in Sujood. Time to see how beautiful Islam can be.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Welcome back. This is the Wake Up Project with me, Shaykh Faheem of the Islamic Lifestyle Solutions, on a program dedicated to the analysis of the signs of the end times. You will forgive me, as you are well aware, over the years with my vocal issues and obviously being in the state of fasting, unable to have water. If I have to cough in between, you will forgive me and understand. I did forget as well to announce, inshallah, as per the request of the brother Abdul Qadir, who had asked me several times to announce, inshallah, tomorrow I will be delivering the discourse at the King's Rest Masjid for Jum'ah, and the continuation of the discourse will be on Saturday after the Salatul Taraweeh. The program for tomorrow, the lecture starts at 12:20 promptly, and the topic will be the Quran, the past, present, and future, discussing its miraculous message. So that will be tomorrow, the Jum'ah program at the King's Rest Masjid. I'll be discussing the Quran, past, present, and future, its miraculous message, and it will be continued on Saturday evening after Salatul Taraweeh. Inshallah, do join us for that particular program. Right, so let's move on to the next thing. So on the question itself, is the Dajjal born already? So as far as born, meaning here and now in our dimension of time, and pertaining to that picture that everyone sees and gets worried about, that's not the case. Now, there's a more interesting avenue to it. And again, we've clarified that we don't think of Dajjal as a cyclops-like creature. He will have two eyes. And remember, Dajjal is all about deception. If his entire modus operandi and mission is to deceive you, how will he deceive you if he looks like a cyclops-like creature? You'd see a cyclops-like creature who's going to do all of these things. You'll say, oh, look, that's the Dajjal. Done. So he'll have to look like a human being, just like us, in order to fulfill the deception. This is quite simply the most logical deduction, and it makes the most sense anyway, right? And of course, it conforms. We don't just go for what's logical, it must conform as well to what's located in the text. Now, the question about where Dajjal is, actually, the secondary question that came, which is, if time permits, how do we reconcile the riwayah of Dajjal being stationary in a specific island and the riwayah about Abdullah ibn Sayyad being a Dajjal? It cannot be a matter of weakness in the matan, meaning the text, or the sanad, the chain of the hadith, as both riwayat are found in Sahih Muslim of Imam Muslim. So here's the explanation, and I've covered both these avenues of discussion in my book on Islamic eschatology, The Beginning of the End. So first thing, there's a very unique narration in the books of hadith. And the Prophet ﷺ one day called the companions. According to narrations, it was around Asr, after Asr prayer. They finished the Asr prayer, and after the Asr prayer, Rasulullah told them, stay where you are. And when they stayed where they are, he told them, today I'm going to tell you something that Tamim ud-Dari had told the Prophet ﷺ. Tamim ud-Dari went on, I'm summarizing for you because of time. Tamim ud-Dari went on a trip with the two tribes, the Banu Laham and Judam tribes, and they were at sea for about 3 months, and there was a storm. And as a result of the storm, they ended up being bashed, with the ocean until the storm settled, and they were at a place that they were unsure of. And remember, this is the Arabs who were very good at what they did in locating and navigating by the stars. So what happens is that they came to an island, and so they took the little side boat and they went to this island first, and it was a very dilapidated island. They first met a creature that was so hairy they couldn't tell head from tail. The creature spoke to them, and the creature identified itself as a jassasa, as a spy. Hence, one of the names of this hadith is called the hadith of the jassasa. This creature then directed them to a man who was already waiting for them, where? At kind of a monastery on the island. When they went to that particular place, they found a man who was chained similarly in this kind of way, where his hands were chained to the neck, and also the legs chained by the shins or the knees, depending on the translation and the narration, right? And this man began to question them. And they asked him who he is, and he said, I'll explain you who I am soon. He said, I have some questions for you. He asked them questions about certain locations. Again, I'm summarizing. He asked him about 3 specific locations, and from these locations, we know that they are linked in the area of what we call today Syro-Palestine, right, in the Holy Land. And he asked about specific things in relation to these areas, whether the water is still there in the wells, and then he asked about the Tigris, the Lake Tiberias, and other things. Again, that's not the part of discussion. And he asked about the Prophet ﷺ. And when he asked about the Prophet ﷺ, he even advised them that they should obey him. He asked whether the Prophet ﷺ had migrated. And after this, he says, now listen carefully. He says, I am Dajjal, and soon I will be permitted to leave this place, and I will enter every town and every city except Mecca and Medina, where angels bearing unsheathed swords will not allow me to enter, and so forth. So he, as a grown man, so this alleviates the misconception of Dajjal being born as a child. So this is the first thing I want to say. If anyone tells you that Dajjal is born and they show a picture of a child, say, hold on. If you say this, what happens to the hadith of Tamim ud-Dari, the hadith of the Jassasa, where Dajjal was already a grown man? How do you reconcile the two? So we reject this claim of a child being born with one eye. 2 reasons. 1, this hadith. 2, Dajjal will have 2 eyes, because of the hadiths that I've explained, the hadith that I've explained. So we need to be smart, and we can refute this quite easily. Then Tamim ud-Dari, obviously now at this point he's not a Muslim, and he's been hearing all of these things. He came to the Prophet ﷺ and he accepted Islam. Why? Because all of the things that Rasulullah had been saying, he had seen it. And Rasulullah at this point in time, he strikes his knee now in his thigh, and he tells, the Sahaba Ikram that this is Taiba, meaning this is the place that Dajjal is not going to enter. And then Rasulullah said, he is in the east, he is in the east, he is in the east. He is in the east. Now here's the thing. When we ask where he is, where he's moving, all of these things, there's a simple way to understand this, okay? We know that when the Prophet ﷺ went for Al-Isra wal-Mi'raj, There's a hadith in Al-Bukhari that, and again I've covered it in the book, that the Prophet ﷺ met, meaning he saw, and this is in the Meccan period, he saw Al-Masih al-Dajjal. So this means that whatever and wherever Tamim al-Dari and the crew, whatever they saw, this may have been Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showing them a dimension of time for that period they had seen. And it was done for this specific reason that they could come and report the information. Right now, there are angels on our shoulders, and they can see us, but we cannot see them. And this is also logical, because why? If they are writing our deeds, this means they can see us. But can we see them? No. So they are in a dimension of time, but sharing the same space on earth. Within the same earth, we have the jinn kind. And they too, from that vantage point in that dimension, can affect us by, especially the shayateen, meaning the shayateen, through waswasa. But can we see them? No. So there are dimensions of time in which certain things, by the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, are here, but we can't see it. So an example of this is in the story of Uzair alayhi salam, that he entered into Jerusalem. It's in the Quran, in Surah Al-Baqarah, and he found the city khawiyatun ala urushiha. It was turned upside down, meaning it was in a completely ruined state. And he asked the question that how will Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring the city back to life after its death, meaning it's completely ruined. And he wondered, he pondered, how will it become a booming city and town again? فَأَمَاتَهُ اللَّهُ مِئَةَ عَامٍ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala caused him to enter into a deep sleep. For how long? 100 years. مِئَةَ عَامٍ. For those 100 years, he did not age. But nobody could see him. Imagine 100 years, nobody saw him, but he was right there. Likewise with the story of the sleepers of the cave, which happens to be located in a chapter that the Prophet ﷺ has linked to Al-Masih al-Dajjal. Coincidence? I think not. We don't believe in coincidences. And they slept for 300 years. Nobody found them. So Al-Masih al-Dajjal is in a dimension of time. Now this is to answer the question even further. Is he moving? Yes, he is. The Prophet ﷺ said Dajjal will be on earth for 40 days. One day like a year, one day like a month, one day like a week, and the rest of his days like your days. So when he moves between these dimensions, getting ever so closer to our dimension of time and space, until he reaches our days, where we will actually be able to see him. This is why we don't have riwayat of him being born. There'll be an emergence. So something will happen. We don't know what it is. Out of nowhere, there'll be this man who will come and he will claim. Now, how that's going to happen, there are allusions to it. There are dreams that the Prophet ﷺ had that give us an idea. There are ideas that we can put together, but we don't know. But I can tell you one thing. It's going to be one big show. It's going to create a lot of confusion. One picture about one deformed child with an eye creates so much of confusion in the ummah. Can you imagine? When the real deal comes through with his fitna and his fasad, what's going to happen? It's going to be a difficult time. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ has given us certain ways to protect ourselves. One of which is the recitation of Surah Al-Kahf, the first 10 verses. How difficult is it to learn, to memorize and understand the first 10 verses of Surah Al-Kahf? It's Ramadan now. If you read it morning and evening for 30 days, that should be enough for it to be in the memory. And then every Thursday evening, between Maghrib of Thursday till Friday, that should suffice. So, is the Dajjal born? No. Whenever he was created, however, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whenever that period of time was, we know that when he was introduced into the timeline in the Sirah tradition, he was already a fully grown man. Now, to the last part of the question, how do we bring congruity between this and Ibn Sayyad? Well, this is the thing. The Prophet ﷺ spoke about the Dajjal so much. Some people today say, hey, don't worry about this, man, do your ibadah. I believe that is true. You focus on yourself, but don't say, oh, don't worry about this. That's ignorance. Because what you're actually doing is saying, don't worry about something that the Prophet ﷺ asked us to worry about. That's in reality what you're saying. Don't worry and don't focus about something which the Messenger ﷺ worried about. Don't worry and don't focus about something which is in almost every book, every major book of hadith. Yeah, ignore it. Worry about yourself. That's what we're saying. Ibn Sayyad was suspected by certain companions. Why he was suspected? They had their reasons. But when the Prophet ﷺ investigated the matter, Sayyidina Umar bin al-Khattab radiallahu ta'ala and said, O Messenger of Allah sallam, give me permission and I'll take off his neck. The Messenger sallam replied, O Umar, if he is Dajjal, you won't be able to kill him. Why? Because that's not your job. That's the job of Nabi Isa alayhi salam. And did Nabi Isa alayhi salam return in the prophetic era to kill Ibn Sayyad? No. So Ibn Sayyad was not Dajjal. And this is also clarified, if I'm not mistaken, Al-Bukhari, where Ibn Sayyad had a discussion with Sayyidina, I think it's Abu, I can't get the name of the companion right now, famous Sahabi. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammad wa sahbihi barik sallim khair. It'll come to mind, but I have covered it in one of the books. And he clarified with this particular Sahabi, and he said to him that I'm ashamed of you. That why, of all the people, you should know better that, there are all of these reasons that the Prophet said. So, of course, Ibn Sayyad was not Dajjal. So, what we are being told between these two narrations is that we need to apply the rational faculty. We need to investigate. That's the main thing here. We need to look at the textual information in the Quran, in the Sunnah, before we lose our minds and become emotional over the particular subject. And this is one of the huge problems in our ummah today. We become emotional first before we are rational. Now, when I say rational, I don't mean independently rational. I mean rational within the confines of Sharia. We're going to take our last break just for a minute or so, inshallah, and then we're going to return and close up. Stay tuned. Assalamu alaikum.
Think Waffle on Cafe. Don't just think of waffle.
No, nothing. It was not related to you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Welcome back. So let's just close up on the subject, right? The important point that we wanted to drive here is this. When you as a Muslim receives this kind of information, you first need to think about it. You need to first analyze what is being said and take a deep breath and ask yourself, does this make sense? Firstly, is this what the Quran says? Is this what the Hadith is? If I don't know, let us inquire from one of the ulama who know about the subject. Then, once we get clarity, then let's start sending the information out. If we jump the gun and start sending the information out before that time period, then we create panic. In relation to the subject of Al-Masih al-Dajjal, there is no other sign that we've been warned about more greater than this. And it's times like this in the month of Ramadan where we have the opportunity. We should make dua. Rasulullah read a very, very beautiful dua. You'll find it in the major books of hadith. Allahumma inna na'udhu bika min adhab al-qabr, wa na'udhu bika min adhab jahannam, wa na'udhu bika min fitnati al-mahya wal-mamat, wa na'udhu bika min fitnati al-masih al-dajjal. Try to memorize it and try to read after your salah, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect you from various kinds of fitna, and one of which is the fitna of al-Masih al-Dajjal. Learn the 10 verses of Surah Al-Kahf. Study Surah Al-Kahf that you can learn. In my advice would be, first, know your aqidah, know your creed. Then know your fiqh, your jurisprudence. From there, go on to the matters of spirituality, humanity, whatever the case is, but know it. If you ever want to know, go into Hadith Jibreel, know about Islam, Iman, Ihsan, but for some reason, the whole world wants to forget that Jibreel alayhi salam asked about the signs of Qiyamah in Hadith Jibreel. We love to talk about the other three things. For some reason, we just want to turn away the subject of eschatology under the carpet. And alhamdulillah, for several years now, we're trying to bring about the revival of the subject within our local community. And if you haven't read about it, it's Ramadan. Try and read as much Quran. One is tilawa, utlu ma uhiya is tilawa. One is iqra, read. Try to read Quran also, in as much as you are reciting and getting the sawab. Try and read as well. A reminder again, if you haven't studied your aqidah and your creed, I will be teaching a course on the creed of Imam al-Nasafi, which is the aqidah of the Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Try and register for the course. We've got 3 classes available, inshallah, starting from the 19th of May. Contact us for the registration forms. Inshallah, tomorrow I will be delivering the Jum'ah discourse at the King's Rest Masjid. The subject is the Quran, past, present, and future. We'll be looking at the miraculous message of the Quran, and then it will be continued as well. Those of you in the Sherwood area, of course, first join your local masjid. If for whatever reason you can't join your masjid, you can join us for Salatul Taraweeh at our offices on 853 Jan Smuts Highway. Join us for Salatul Taraweeh. 7:05 p.m. is the Adhan, 7:15 p.m. Is the Salatul Taraweeh, and we can get to meet you as well. If anything good has been achieved, the praise belongs to Allah. The faults are mine. Astaghfirullah Rabbi min kulli dhanbi wa atubu ilayh. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.